We are living in an era of seismic challenges. Our global food system faces never-before-seen stresses, from the climate crisis, population growth, and fractured supply chains.
But might these shocks to our system actually be a catalyst for positive change? This is just so incredible.
I'm on a journey to witness for myself.
Oh, look at this!
How farmers, scientists, and innovators are radically reimagining how we grow our food and produce it.
I feel like I'm in a space station and super perfect lettuce has just magically appeared from the heavens. It's a quest to meet the greatest challenges that are facing humanity.
We have to wake up and we have to feed the world. That's a big job.
And create a new and better food future.
This time, the endangered food list.
Is this a sign of things to come? Is this the future?
Our favorite crops at risk of damage or extinction.
It's one of those things that definitely keeps me up at night.
And the fight to save the food we need and love.
This isn't just your family business. This is the livelihoods of the people of an entire region.
Absolutely.
This is Lisbon, one of the oldest cities in Portugal, and a destination for food lovers from around the world. Its historic markets spread across this coastal capital, piled high with delicious and nutritious produce.
The stuff is just all so beautiful. I have this obsession whenever I travel that I've got to go find where people buy their food, because there's always this unusual combination of things that I'm familiar with, you know, mushrooms, tomatoes, peppers, garlic, and then bam, right in the middle, big old bags of live snails.
But believe it or not, many of the important foods that fill these markets, and markets just like them around the world, are under serious threat of extinction. The World Economic Forum has identified a list of endangered foods, and it doesn't make for pretty reading. This is not a list of wild, rare, exotic species that we can conveniently push to the back of our minds. This is food that underpins our daily lives.
A surprisingly long list of really everyday crops has now made their way onto the endangered foods list. And this includes lots of species that you've probably already eaten today. So let's say you had a banana with your cereal at breakfast, or maybe you're an avocado toast fan, strawberries, peaches, and then of course there's all the species that give us our pleasure, the grapes that grow into wine, the coffee beans that are essential to a morning cappuccino. And for me personally, the biggest disaster is chocolate.
It's a list that includes foods that are vital to our existence and our economies. Global warming is changing growing conditions. Pests, diseases, floods, drought, and even farmers themselves moving away from crops that cannot guarantee livelihoods means that we're at risk of losing them. The notion of food security might be foreign to many, but when it's chocolate and wine that's under threat, people suddenly start to pay attention. So I went to see for myself what our farmers, scientists, and innovators are doing to rescue some of these foods from going the same way as the dodo or dinosaur. And I'm starting with a fruit that is vital to the livelihoods of millions.
This is just so incredible. Every mountain, wherever you see, has been carved out by hand just for our love of grapevines.
Wine is a $326 billion industry, and it's been shaping our lives and countryside for thousands of years.
Regular people look at this and just think how beautiful it is. But if you're a botanist, you're in awe of the amount of work this has taken.
But some have predicted a potential drop in wine production of up to 85% over the next 50 years as regions known for fine wine become too hot to produce it. Symington Family Estates is one of Portugal's largest and most historic wine and port producers.
When you drive around here, you just see mile after mile of vineyards. So this isn't just your family business. This is the livelihoods of the people of an entire region.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this was bought by my great-grandfather in 1896. And it's here where we've stored and aged our ports for literally generations.
Do you feel there's a huge weight of expectation of, like ancestors you've got to live up to?
I think there's definitely responsibility. Obviously being the 5th generation, each generation has come up against their individual challenges. And obviously what we are going to need to focus on mostly and adapt with is climate change.
Of the 1,100 planted varieties of wine grapes that exist, only around a dozen of them, that's just a tiny 1%, make up the majority of our favorite wines. It leaves the wine industry particularly vulnerable if those varieties fail to cope with climate change. So the Symington family are amongst several grape growers experimenting with some of the remaining 1,088 wine grape varieties.
So tell me about the collection in this field.
This is what we call a library of vines, 37 different varieties. We're looking at varieties that have got somewhat forgotten over time. Generally, as a region, we focused on 6 main varieties, but there are many other varieties that we would like to see whether they, today, are more suitable from the climate change aspect.
We need to have the most information available so that we make the right decisions now for the future generations.
And this historic business is not only looking to the past for solutions, they're also embracing cutting-edge tech to try and get wine off the endangered foods list.
Hi, James.
So show me what we're looking at,
Here.
Fernando.
Here.
Oh! Now this I wasn't expecting. Look at this!
Yeah, it's autonomous robot monitoring our vineyards.
So how does it not bump into the different aisles?
They have sensors that identify the different vegetation.
Can we stop it?
Yes.
I'd like to...
Yes.
So this display here, is this all the information it's gathering?
Yeah.
Walk me through this stuff. Like, for example, I mean, I can see you've got air temperature, 34.5, I can feel that. And this water stress, I'm pretty close on that too. Leaf temperature.
Leaf temperature is temperature of the leaf.
Why is it gathering that?
Yes, because we can correlate this with the water potential of the leaves.
So you can
Transform.
tell from
Yes.
the temperature of the leaf how much
Yes.
water is inside them.
Yes.
And
yes.
so therefore how well hydrated the vine is.
Yes. Yes.
And therefore how much water it may need.
Yes.
By a comparison, the Vine Scout is 300 times more efficient at taking sample readings than a human using existing technology. With the vast amount of information gathered, it provides winemakers with the ability to constantly monitor the vines for stress.
It's both so interesting to meet a family that's been growing in this place for centuries. And then when you see something that's so high-tech, is this a sign of things to come? Is this the future?
Yeah, because with this kind of data, we can help to preserve the future of this place because we can take actions in order to fight this evolution in the future.
So to allow centuries of culture and tradition to carry on far into the future.
For the Symingtons, introducing new grape varieties more suited to rising temperatures and protecting their classic varieties with cutting-edge technology will hopefully allow centuries of tradition to carry on well into the future. If you were horrified at the thought of losing wine from your life, brace yourself for the next on the list of endangered foods that could disappear from your shopping basket: chocolate.
And it doesn't matter whether your bar is milk, white, or dark, or if you're even talking about cocoa powder, the kind of thing you put in cakes, cookies, and hot chocolate. All of those products come from a single species, and it's under threat.
adalah buah kakao. Ketika diproduksi, diolah menjadi coklat.
Beberapa tahun ini kami belum menikmati hasil yang cukup baik karena udara yang tidak selalu stabil. Curah hujan yang tinggi dan musim kemarau yang berkepanjangan.
Cocoa trees grow in hot, rainy, tropical areas within 20 degrees latitude of the equator, often by smallholders. But unpredictable weather patterns caused by climate change are causing big problems, including the loss of vital pollinating insects, meaning farmers like Reynold are literally having to take matters into their own hands.
Kita harus mencoba untuk melakukan hand pollinasi. Proses terjadinya pada saat bunga banyak pada pohon, kita dapat melakukannya. Hand pollinasi ini sangat membantu. Tetapi apabila penyerbukan tangan ini gagal, ini sangat mempengaruhi bagi ekonomi saya bersama keluarga karena tidak dapat memenuhi kebutuhan keluarga kami.
In Brazil, cocoa farmers are also adapting to climate change.
O cacau é nossa única fonte de renda na nossa região. Sem o cacau, não podemos ter emprego e não podemos colher nada.
Farmers here are using agroforestry, a system that sees cocoa trees planted through thinned-out native forests. These plantations are known as cabrucas.
A cabruca é um sistema tradicional de cultivo de cacau, um sistema de água florestal, aonde o cacau se desenvolve melhor na sombra das árvores, tornando-se a costa cacaueira mais atraente para a biodiversidade.
Protecting the delicate cocoa fruit from the elements underneath a large biodiverse canopy helps increase natural pollination and decrease climate-related disease. With continued help from the global agroforestry network, systems in place here and around the world could stop cocoa and chocolate from turning into a thing of the past. But wine and chocolate are not the only global food superstars on the endangered list.
Since the ends of these leaves got burned, that means we've lost next year's crop as well.
And just how much time is left before a climate change-driven crop catastrophe?
How long could it be before we actually see evidence of this on supermarket shelves?
We should be prepared for anything.
Climate change is already beginning to have a negative impact on the growing conditions for all sorts of everyday fruits and vegetables. And to the extent where in some situations, if we don't do something immediately, these things will be lost forever.
I've already seen how wine and chocolate are on the endangered foods list, and the measures being taken to try and protect their future. But they're not the only vitally important foods under threat. California has become one of the world's biggest producers of avocados, with consumption more than quadrupling in the US and the market growing by 2.5 times globally over the past 20 years. But in recent years, for the likes of fifth-generation farmer Chris Sayer, the daily battle against climate change is making growing this fruit almost impossible.
So this tree gives a look at what heat damage does to an avocado tree. Bright sunlight sunburned a lot of the fruit and a lot of the limbs. We should be seeing out here at the end new baby fruit for the coming year. And of course, since the ends of these leaves got burned, that means we've lost next year's crop as well.
For Chris, excessive heat and prolonged droughts are the main challenges when it comes to growing avocados, and the situation is only getting worse. Wildfires caused by intense heat waves raged across California in 2020, decimating 4.1 million acres of land.
Climate change is definitely one of the major threats we face growing avocados. It's one of those things that definitely keeps me up at night.
To combat the effects of searing heat day to day, Chris has 3 vital systems in place.
In California, we live with drought 6 to 9 months out of every year anyway. We've got a micro sprinkler irrigation system here that provides just the right amount of water right to the tree's root zones, right where they need it.
Planting cover crops provides shade and biomass to the soil to retain water.
And then our third approach is to use a sunscreen. This is a very fine clay mixed with water. It keeps the leaves covered a little bit more, helps reflect some of the sun's energy back, and keeps the leaf surface temperatures about 10 or 15 degrees cooler.
As well as the regular daily battles, Chris is gearing up for a much longer-term fight against climate change.
So this is the rootstock trial. This is a spot where we're evaluating different avocado rootstocks for their ability to tolerate heat and salinity in the future.
Salt deposits, which build up in the soil and groundwater during a drought, are also an effect of unpredictable climate.
If there's too much salt in the water, that can impact the trees, it'll cause some of the leaves to shrivel, and you won't get the same size and quality of fruit that you want.
Led by the University of California, Riverside, 400 of Chris's trees are now part of a 20-year trial to establish whether different avocado rootstocks grafted onto different tree varieties might together exhibit increased tolerance to diseases, drought, heat, or soil salinity, with the aim of protecting Chris and farmers like him from climate change in the long term. The clock is certainly ticking for some of our most cherished foods. But what I want to know is just how long we've got left to do something about it.
Hi there, Simran. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Lovely to see you, James.
I've lined up a call with Simran Sethi, author, educator, and globally recognized authority on our changing environmental landscapes.
How long could it be before we actually see this, evidence of this, on supermarket shelves? Is it going to be a slow burn over decades, or is this the kind of thing that could take hold on the turn of a dime?
That's such an interesting question. So there was a very comprehensive study released a couple of years ago, written by 455 experts representing 50 countries, looking at agricultural biodiversity. And what they found was that 1/8 of the world's plant and animal species are now at risk of extinction.
When we think about biodiversity, we tend to think about wild animals and plants, things like tigers or certain trees from the rainforest. We don't tend to think about cultivated plants having to have biodiversity as well.
Biodiversity is woven into every aspect of our lives, from the food we eat, to the pharmaceuticals that we need, to the fodder for animals, to the fiber that we wear. Every single part of our lives are impacted by biodiversity and subsequently by the loss of biodiversity that we're seeing in such extraordinary measure now. We've eroded what we call biodiversity, and we've really put every single food and drink that we consume in a very perilous situation.
Just when you think it can't get any worse, brace yourselves for my next endangered food. This one is enjoyed by the bucket load, and together we consume nearly 500 billion cups of it every year.
It's been argued that caffeine from plants like coffee has helped fuel industrial revolutions around the world to the same extent as fossil fuels. And that's because it allows humans to work harder for longer. So it's not just pleasure that's at risk here, it's economic productivity. And the scientists who are trying to conserve this species face unique challenges.
A picky plant that requires particular conditions to grow, coffee is being attacked from all angles. Climate change, deforestation, droughts, pests, and plant diseases means getting a cup of coffee in the future may not be a given. Importantly, it also means the livelihoods for over 125 million people across the world are at serious risk. Farmers, traders, roasters, baristas, and many more jobs will just all be gone. But there is some hope. Scientists at the National Laboratory for Genetic Resources Preservation are working on it.
We've got about 550,000 samples of seeds that are stored inside this room. It's among the largest collections in the world. Some of these seeds are predicted to be able to survive hundreds to thousands of years at cold storage. Seed banks like this are so important because we capture that genetic diversity and save it for long term. It allows breeders and researchers to have access to these genetic resources for generations to come.
But when it comes to preserving coffee here, there is a serious problem.
The seeds that can store here are called orthodox type seeds. These are the seeds that can tolerate drying as well as cold temperatures. So there are some types of plants that we can't store in a vault like this, and that includes coffee.
Coffee seeds have proven intolerant to long-term storage in extreme drying or freezing conditions, which means at best they can only last up to 12 months. Instead, scientists are looking to preserve the actual plant using a method called cryopreservation.
I have a coffee Arabica Marsalisa culture here, and these are ideally 4 to 6 weeks old. And they're nice and green, and they're proliferating shoots, so I can get multiple terminal buds off of one.
The benefit of preserving the actual vegetative material rather than the seed is that coffee seeds don't always retain the genes of their cultivated parent, meaning that any seeds used to grow new plants may not produce the desired coffee. And in commercial coffee growing, that's a risk not worth taking.
I have a nice stalk here. Now I can start excising the shoot tips out of those little shoots into approximately 1 millimeter tall and wide.
Over the next 24 hours, the shoot tips continue to be carefully prepared, ready for their final destination, to be immersed in extremely cold liquid nitrogen.
Theoretically, they can stay in liquid nitrogen forever. All of the metabolic processes kind of come to a halt, and it's just frozen in time.
Storing these collections of really diverse plants in our international gene banks is critical for future breeding programs.
It's really not an exaggeration to say that in order to conserve the future of our own species, we have to protect the future of key plants that we rely on for our sustenance. And that includes loads of everyday crops. But to me, the really reassuring thing is that farmers and scientists, engineers, haven't taken their eye off the ball. They are working every day to keep us fed.